I told Tony Stark that I represent certain individuals you might know and they call themselves the X-Men and I work with them and a man named Professor Charles Xavier and he will vouch for me because my sister Jean has been working with him also for many years and me and my entire family are Omega-level mutants. We possess extraordinary powers and my name is James Gray and I have the mutant ability to copy anyone's powers and or abilities permanently even if they have vast intelligence and I also don't like being called a mutant. I like being called a metahuman because the word mutant is just racist. And then the Don Cheadle look-alike James Rhodes just started laughing and he said, okay, I'm really starting to like this kid. And then I asked James Rhodes, now do you want me to demonstrate my powers? And he said, yes I do. And then I said, well, you can wish for something and I could give you whatever you want because it's a lot better than freaking out all these people in Burger King right now. And then he said, oh man, I didn't think about that. And then Tony Stark said, it's alright Rhodey, not everyone can be a genius. And then James Rhodes said, okay, so I wished I had $1 billion. And then I asked James Rhodes, do you have a bank account and a phone number for your bank account? And then he said yes. And then I waved my hand with golden light and then I said don't and I snapped my fingers and then I said now call your bank. And then James Rhodes said, okay, so that's it, you just waved your hand and it's done. And then I said, well, it's a bit more complicated than that, but yes, it's usually that simple for me. I just wave my hand and you can get whatever you want. And then James Rhodes said, okay, I'm calling my bank now. And then James Rhodes called his bank and when he was told that he now has $2 billion in his bank account, he smiled so big I thought he might also have a heart attack. And then he said, okay, thank you for your help ma'am, goodbye. And then the lady banker on James' cell phone asked if he would like to start a retirement account since he now has so much money. And then James Rhodes hung up on the lady banker mid-sentence and then James looked at me shocked and he said, you just made all of my problems go away. And then I said, well, I don't know if I made all your problems go away, but it definitely helps a lot if a person is rich. And then James Rhodes asked me, is there anything you can't do? And then I said, no, not really, you see I can do anything James Rhodes, my powers have no limits, they are beyond omnipotence, meaning they are beyond every multiverse. Think about it this way, I'm the most powerful a human can be in a mortal body and I'm also truly immortal, and yes, I also have the powers to give people immortality. Take my wife Jessica Jones here for example, I can give her immortality and then I can also give you and Tony Stark whatever your heart desires, if you want that. And then James Rhodes said, okay, I changed my mind, I want to be your best friend now. And then I smiled warmly and I said, okay Rhodey, I knew you would come around. And then I said, now if you two don't mind, I'm going to eat my burgers because I'm famished. And my wife Jessica Jones was still eating and then I began to eat very quickly because I knew that Tony Stark or James Rhodes would want to ask me more questions soon, so I ate my food really fast so I could answer their questions. And then Tony Stark asked me, wait a minute, if you're immortal then why do you have to eat food? And then I said, right, so it's optional for me, I don't have to eat food and I don't have to sleep or drink water either, but I still feel everything that a human being feels because I'm still human, and I'm sure you understand all that, Tony Stark. And then Tony said, yes, I see that you're human, but if you're omnipotent and you have godlike powers. And then I quickly interrupted him and I said, yes, I do have the powers of God and I am omnipotent, and before you ask, yes, I also have beyond genius level intelligence, and yes, I also see the future in every timeline, even this one. And then Tony Stark asked me, well, how is that even physically possible? And then I said, well, because my human body is also reinforced and godlike, and as you can see I'm also very muscular and handsome and I exercise and I also do calisthenics every day. And then Jessica Jones said, I can vouch for that because me and James already have 5 kids. And then Tony Stark said, wow, 5 kids, that's something else. And then I said, yes, well, we also live in New York City, I'm guessing some place near Hell's Kitchen I think, but I could be wrong. And then Tony Stark smirked and said, maybe soon I'll buy a building in New York City. And then he asked me, did you pay for our meal using your magical powers? And then I said, no, I'm a billionaire and I own an internet company store and you may know it and it's called Amazon and Amazon Prime. And then Tony Stark looked surprised and he said, I'm impressed, but I just couldn't remember anything about you.